this meeting to order. Would someone move action item 1.02, please?
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Or I'm a yes, I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm a yes,
That's
Mr.
okay.
Perry.
Mr. DeJorme,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Elbegor.
Yes.
In lieu of public forum, our board asks that you submit questions or comments to email, and the address is clerk@fulton.cnyric.org. You may find that address on the district website. Item 1.04,
Move it.
Second.
discussion. Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. DeJorme,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
and Mrs. Elbegor.
Yes.
Are there any questions with regards to the upcoming meetings that are listed? Okay, if not, I would like someone to move action item 2.02.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. DeJorme,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper, Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
and Mrs. Elbegor.
Yes.
And now I turn this over to Superintendent Polvino.
Hi, good evening. Point of order, Ms. Griffin, on 1.02, did you acknowledge that there was in 7.02 and 7.09, there were names added? I'm not sure, did they? I don't recall being asked. If I did, I didn't. I thought, I just want to make sure that that was addressed.
Thank you. I did ask if there was any discussion, but I didn't wait for you. So I apologize for that. And did everyone get that change? There were names added to those two items?
7.02, there was a name added, and 7.09, there was a name added
Yes.
today. I just wanted to have that just in case there was a
No,
question.
I'm glad because it was a late change. So thank you for that. And again, I apologize. I didn't wait long enough for you. I apologize.
Okay, we'll move forward. So one, I'd always like to start, it's hard to believe we're here in June. I want to just extend to our staff. I know we have one more board meeting in June, but I always want to acknowledge our staff, our students, our families, and obviously our board. Thank you for the support. It's hard to believe that we are in our 10th month of school. We've come a long way. I think we've had some successes. We've had great learning experiences. Not only for our kids, we've learned a lot, but also I think we've learned a lot about some things that we want to keep in place after we're long, but hopefully COVID is in the rearview mirror, and we've learned some strategies, the use of these Google Meets and such, to be more efficient and effective in everything that we do. So again, I want to extend my appreciation to everyone, our golden son, all aspects of our organization, every person who works for us, and all of our kids. Just tremendous efforts throughout the course of the year, and here we are in the last 2-week stretch of the school year, so thank you. This evening, we continue on with our capital improvement project. I've asked King and LaChase to be present this evening. I'm going to try to show, but my screen looks different this evening, so I'm not sure why it looks this way. I'm not seeing the sharing. Oh, there it is, the present now. I'm going to ask Carrie and Mike James if you'd like to begin, and I will attempt to get us on the screen, and we'll see if I can accomplish this. We'll find out in a second, won't we?
There it is.
Okay. And I'm not, is yours dark? Mine looks very dark on the screen. Can you see that?
I can see it fine.
All right.
And I think Carrie and I were going to start with a little history of something that both Brian and Robin recommended. Carrie, are you there? Or are you on mute? I don't hear Carrie. No. Why don't I go ahead and get started then? We're going to share responsibilities here, but I can run with this. I just wanted to take a few minutes. Originally, this one, we went out for a referendum and the project passed. We were going to break this into 2 phases. And really, it's turned into much more than that. We've had multiple phases, I think 5 altogether. So I think for the board's benefit, we wanted to take just a couple minutes and review a little bit of the history before we talk about phase 2C in this document that we have in front of us. Remember, primarily when we went out for referendum, this was going to be kind of a security project and site related. There were a number of other scope items, but primarily it was security and site. And we actually developed those documents and went to SCD, received approval, went out to bid, and then COVID hit right at that same time and kind of rocked everyone. And I think board decided to pull back a little bit and think about what your priorities were in light of COVID. So what was decided was that with LaChase's help, we awarded just the site package from phase 1. And that's the work you see at Lanigan already, and that you're about to see at the junior high and at Volney. And following that, the district decided we wanted to put an emphasis on mechanical work and ventilation and a few other district priorities, which we have been doing in the months since. But there were other priorities that we wanted to address. We called a package phase 1B that we put out, which was the generator for the junior high school, as well as some miscellaneous architectural scope at Volney, Lanigan, and the junior high. Work that had to be done in support of the site package that was just accepted. So that's been bid and awarded, and that's going to occur. Following 1B, we knew that the district has had a long history of issues with your fire alarm systems. Even last summer, late in the summer, I remember having kind of an emergency meeting at the junior high with Brian and Robin and others, because so many of the heads at the junior high were down. High school were down. So we decided to put out a fire alarm package that we call 2A. That's been bid and I believe is about to be awarded, including the PO for those devices. That's work at G. Ray Bodley, the Granby, and Lanigan. Lanigan wasn't originally part of that package, but it was added because we knew you had some issues there as well. Their goal there was kind of a unified fire alarm system. So that's underway. The district also looked at a package that we called 2B. 2B was all the work that you've committed to the public to do over at the high school, including the turf and the track, the artificial turf and the track, some sidewalks, and mechanical ventilation improvements at the third gym in the media center that frankly you tried to do several years ago, probably more than once, and it wasn't accomplished. So we put that package together, went to SED, where it is now, receiving approval, and LaChase is working with their team on estimating 2B. So that's a little bit of a history of how we got to 2C. The list that Brian has online here in front of us is a mix of scope, but again, primarily mechanical and ventilation oriented. So what I'd like to do, if you're like me, you like to peek at the numbers and even peek down below. I know everybody has this document in front of you, but we'll go building by building. And then with LaChase's help, we'll talk a little bit about where the budget stands. So at G. Ray Bodley, at the very top, there are a number of exterior doors that we deemed a priority for security and doors that are just corroding. So they're included in the scope. Post-referendum, it was brought to our attention that the public address system at G. Ray Bodley was in need of updating. We carried a figure for that. That could be considered kind of a security and safety item. The big item there is the next one. You'll see a BCS over in the far left, and that means it was an item that we found in the building condition survey from 2015. There's a number of those here listed, but we went back to look for mechanical and ventilation issues that maybe weren't going to be addressed in the original 2 phases. So that's $1 million, $1.5 million to replace all the univentilators throughout G. Ray Bodley High School. Last 2 items are expanded controls, some new software and server updates related to your mechanical and ventilation systems. And then a most recent add was the water storage tank that I'm sure you're all aware of that has been leaking for a while and really failed earlier, I guess, last month. So we picked up that line item to replace that. You'll notice at this point, no new work at the junior high because some of that, some scope was included in the previous phases for the junior high. Takes us to the Granby Elementary School, where originally, and we're still planning to update the site work. That's the west parking lot and expanded parking on the east loop. That was, as I mentioned, a part of the original referendum. You've seen those renderings, and that's still in the scope. The pool entrance security modifications was also part of the original scope. And then we've included mechanical ventilation improvements for the pool air handling units and ventilation of the mechanical room that's down on the lower level. So all, very sound scope items at Granby. Lanigan includes 2 scope items. Again, we've done some work at Lanigan already in the previous phases, but 2 items we picked up in the building condition survey was replacement of 1 boiler, the controls update, and a condensate receiver that's been giving your maintenance team some trouble. After that is more ventilation at the 1957 wing. That's replacement of an air handling unit, controls and updating the ductwork serving that wing. At Volney, we have 2 items out of the BCS, is replacing isolation valves at the front of the building. Again, valves that have been troublesome and leaking. We've watched your maintenance people struggle with those as well. And then replacing the original supply units in the mezzanine. That is a mechanical unit as well. So that's ventilation. Lastly, at Fairgrave, 2 items that were on the original scope: electrical improvements, switchgear, corridor panel, and boiler electrical panel replacement. You've got a number of outdated panels there that are difficult to find parts for and have limited capacity. And then an item that came up when I first arrived at the district was plumbing and water distribution improvements at Fairgrave. You have some very outdated plumbing in that building, the original plumbing that, again, could be a school closer if it's a severe enough issue. So we thought this is the right time to address that. And lastly, an item that was added coming out of the building condition survey is replacing a condensate pump. The Education Center is listed, but you'll recall that previously the board decided to not pursue any additional work at the Education Center in lieu of the other priorities at the other buildings. So unless there's a few questions, I'll just touch on the totals there. The total of everything that we have listed as proposed scope in 2C is just over $4 million. The funds that we believe we have remaining coming out of the previous phases, including 2B, is $3.6 million. So we're slightly over. But there's more to be shared there, and maybe I'll turn it over to Bob or Laird, that
I
the
can jump in
remaining
on that.
funds might be more than we expect.
Yeah, really what everybody can hear me, right? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry.
Can
Just
hear
want to make sure before I talk for 5 minutes and nobody can hear anything. The 3.6 was really established by our initial estimate, just as a baseline. What really we've been going off of is entire phase 2, which would include the 2B and 2C portions, was at 6.4 million. Right now we're estimating the 2B. That package was just assembled and went, so we have a full package now of drawings and specs that we're estimating. So we feel, just even in a preliminary look, that realistically that 2B number is probably closer to 2.2, 2.4, which would make up that difference of what was shown in the 3.6. 3.6 really was just established based upon the initial estimate, and again, there were some items that were not accounted for in that budget that are now on that list. So that really kind of creates that delta, that if we were to have included that in that preliminary budget estimate, it would bring it to that point. I think after reviewing things, that we feel at this point that, given what we know about the current market conditions and everything else, that that the scope presented here for both 2B and 2C is achievable with the budget remaining, with those remaining hard costs of that 6.4. Given the stipulation that, again, we all know crazy things happen, and we don't know what the bidding environment's going to be like. But I think, given what we know now, it's achievable, but we still need to maybe scrutinize some items and have a good bid strategy of providing alternates. That's always a good bid strategy. But I think going in and maybe having to go and look at some of these items to prioritize them, to have them as possible alternates. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't get them. It just means that come bid time when this is ready next, late winter, or whenever it is, whenever we get it back from SED, if the bidding environment is very favorable, we might get every single item. The bidding environment might not be so favorable at that point. We just really don't know. But at least you have that option to include the scope. And if we maybe necessarily can't award it at that initial award, it is a possibility through managing the project and managing the budget, that on the back end, with whatever contingencies we have and everything else, that those are items that we can maybe get towards the back end of the project and commit to them at a later date. I think that's a typical strategy we'd like to do anyway. Not nearly as intricate as we tried in the first go around, but definitely a good bid strategy to have just all around. Just again, because nobody has a crystal ball to know what these numbers are going to come in at, a year from now.
And I didn't really leave much time for discussion, and I believe Carrie's back online too. So if there are questions, we
I
can
think so.
address those.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you.
Did it work?
Yes.
Okay.
You're on, Carrie.
Sorry for that. Technical difficulty.
So I think as you're hearing, I think by pulling up the reins, and I think we made some good decisions in breaking up the work, laying things out a little bit differently, and going back to that 2015 building plan, and really looking at what the projects are, what were things in there specifically around ventilation. I think King & King and LaChase have done a good job going back through, and as you saw in the scope that was presented this evening, greater emphasis on air handling, ventilation. Obviously, that's hand in hand with priorities nationally when you see the use of the federal funds, and they talk a lot about air quality, air movement in schools. Obviously, many schools across the country are older, and obviously the systems need to be caught up. And I think in small cities in particular, and this board is well aware, especially those who've been on here for a while, that small cities, because of the way we can do capital projects, you end up doing small parts a number of different times over a lot of different years where you see some districts have these large 50, $60 million projects. We have small projects. We have 14 million, 9 million, so on and so forth. And that's what results. So those are what you see is our best at this point in time. When we went back through, these were the priorities. So what types of questions do board members have this evening?
Brian, I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that one of the things we talked about is with the changes that are here, they fall under, and Bob hit on it a little bit, under safety and security, between the, improved air ventilation for better health and safety. We're still in that framework. And then the alarm system is about safety and security as well. And they're very important pieces, and not things that we felt should wait until we have the opportunity to do another project.
Other thoughts or questions? What I would say, King and LaChase representatives, I think we have a meeting coming up this Friday as well. I think that's what I saw on my calendar.
That's right.
As well as we would have one a couple weeks later that we talked about prioritizing the priorities, if you will, just in case. I mean, last year when those initial costs came in, obviously COVID had increased some costs, I think, but in a way, everything happens for a reason. That's allowed us to change our scope, of work. And I think in a way it brings it in alignment with the needs that align with ensuring the safety of our staff and students as they come back in, as we build to make sure that air quality and all these other pieces, make sure we have good water coming in and out of the building. Some of it's just basic infrastructure types of things. Also to make sure we have long-term capacity of things. For example, the work in the mechanical room at Granby really is when you have corrosives and things like that, water and all that, it's actually reducing the longevity of some of our equipment. So the idea is to get that air moving so that our equipment lasts longer. So those are some of the things that we have in there. I would ask Carrie, could you comment at all? I know there's a lot of questions out there and discussion around the use of federal funds and the way they are associated, with possibilities of doing things. I know we've had some conversation, and I have set aside a block of money, which I could easily switch other places. But one of the things that we were talking about, what are types of projects that you might consider or bring, knowing our buildings, not only as a former graduate, but also as a person who's been looking at these buildings for a while now as an architect?
Yeah, certainly any type of HVAC project that includes air handlers, unit ventilators, items like that would qualify based on what we know today on the guidance that has been released. But additionally, the guidance says that you can also tackle exterior doors and windows. And you'll notice that those weren't on the list that Mike rattled off today because it was a real focus on air quality. However, we know that there are a handful of buildings in the district that have had historically issues with windows, or may have windows that are approaching the end of their expected useful life. They're okay right now, but is this money a way to take care of an issue that may present itself to us down the road in the next 5-6 years? Now, that said, we don't have a lot of specific or technical guidance on how to actually do a project to use this money. We know as of today that we have to go to the state education department at facilities planning and have the project reviewed just like any other capital project. We believe that based on the size of these projects, we expect that they'll have to be publicly bid. We know that every school district in the state has the same money coming at them at the same time, and that all of you are looking to do the same types of projects in the same time frame, which makes LaChase and King a little bit nervous, because if everyone goes out to bid at the same time with a capital project for HVAC or an ARP project, for HVAC, who are these contractors that are going to do the work? How are they going to possibly do it all? So it's still very murky. We have very limited guidance, but as soon as we find any information, we'll certainly share it with Brian, and I think vice versa. Sometimes he gets guidance before we do from facilities planning.
Thank you, Carrie. I think that's something. So we've got some money set aside that are built into our initial kinds of thoughts to allow us some flexibility. And obviously some of those monies, it looks like they go out as far as 2024, 25. So again, we've been having conversations at each of our capital improvement meetings or update meetings on every other Fridays. This is kind of starting to become part of the agenda of those meetings, just to say, what are you hearing? What are we hearing? And going from there. But as Carrie alluded to, one of the concerns is the volume of work that will probably be going on across the state, as well as the availability of materials. And obviously when you have a lot of need and minimal materials, sometimes the prices change. I mean, there's a lot of components to that. So our commitment is to maximize every one of those dollars and strategically use them to meet the needs of our students. And that includes this area of making sure that our buildings are as safe and as possible. So any questions about that?
Brian,
I wish we had a lot more information on that one, but.
Brian, if I can add one more thing I want to share with the board. The other piece about HVAC improvements, if all of the districts across the state are tackling them at the same time, it's 9 times out of 10 work that has to happen during the summer, right? Because we can't be tackling HVAC when school is in session. We can't replace a unit ventilator in a classroom that needs to be occupied the next day. So on top of all of the districts across the state tackling the same type of work, they're also going to all be trying to do it in the same 3-month time frame. It's going to be chaos. So just bear that in mind.
Yep.
Ryan, do you need anything from the board this evening?
Just if there are no questions, I mean, I think what we would move forward with, and as work closely with King and King and LaChase to make priorities and start to set the next steps. Obviously, you know, Bob alluded to, you know, the longer you wait, I mean, everything just, you know, every day results in further, you know, days to get the projects underway. I will say, and you know, finally to see Lanigan almost coming to, you know, fruition out there and getting done as they're doing the landscaping, you start to realize like, okay, you know, it's been a long road, but we're starting to see the outcomes of this capital project. You're starting to see those initial moves, so it's good to see. And I think these projects, they're not glamorous, some of these, but they're projects that will provide us the infrastructure that we need for now in the immediate future, but also down the road. These are problems that have been existing, and I think we just need to keep prioritizing. We must have a new building condition survey process coming up pretty soon, because that's 2015. So we're what, 5-6 years right now. So it's got to be close, right, Carrie? We must be on,
2023.
yeah.
So if I could just ask my
I think
colleague if this makes sense to you, since I didn't hear any questions, just a thumbs up is that we're moving forward, and Brenda has a question.
I do. I did want to ask Carrie, being that all of the schools that you're anticipating around the state will be trying to do this at the same time, is that going to affect the price greatly, do you think? Will that make the price go up a lot more than we're anticipating?
I think it may, right? Because typically, you know, I would say we have maybe 10 to 12 projects across the state, King and King, and construction every summer. If suddenly, but we have, you know, 60 plus clients. If suddenly all 60 are doing projects at the same time, you know, that's 6 times the volume, right? Just round figures. And the contractors don't really exist. So even if, you know, we get the documents in and everyone gets them approved by state education department and we bid, who are these companies that are going to do the work? You know, I think like Bob alluded to earlier, they're going to potentially inflate their prices because there's not going to be competition. Mm-hmm. I think material acquisition may be a problem too, right? You know, if everyone needs 100 unit ventilators, how are we going to get 600,000 unit ventilators out in New York State in a summer, or across 2 summers? I think unless the schedule gets extended, I think it's going to be a challenge with the conditions, with the rules that are in place today.
I think also, Carrie, like you were saying though, you know, we're going after this to see all the HVAC work, not with the thought of using these funds, right? So if we move ahead now, there's the potential that maybe we can get a little bit ahead of it. And while everybody else is trying to get HVAC contractors to do all their work from those funds, now we turn around and say, well, we're doing windows. We're not going to have that. Not to say that we don't have a window contractor problem, but we're doing windows now. We don't have to worry about that potential problem with the HVAC, because that's where it seems like that's where most schools' concentration is going to be. Not to say that's going to happen, but there's that potential. So I think that's good in the sense that we start to move aggressively forward with this 2C portion that we're talking about.
Right. And bringing fresh air into our buildings. I know we have a thing called winter here in Fulton, but getting those doors or windows and even cracking them a bit and be able to safely get air in and out, that they open safely, they don't drop, or they have screens in them. Something as simple as screens. I think, those are the kinds of things that allow us to at least keep the air flowing and things like that. And projects that we know are going to have to be done in the near future. We've got windows in a number of our buildings that are just at their peak of use, and they're starting to exhibit some wear and tear. And we had a great conversation with our head custodians the other day. It was terrific. I enjoyed talking to them, and they were talking about, I asked them for a wish list and things like that. Windows and doors, simple things like that came up, but they talked about them as things that they're continuing to monitor and have to repair and fix. So it may be something that, and these are one-time things. And as Bob alluded to, supply and demand, we look at our needs, we prioritize, but we also direct our mind, like, where can we get that work done and ensure that we can utilize those funds if that's the direction that we want to go. So, all righty. Any other questions for King and King or LaChase?
So can I just get a thumbs up? We're all good then? Thank you.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. You guys are welcome to stay on and hear the rest of our presentations tonight, or you're welcome to excuse yourselves. You're great partners. And as a first time going through this process, my learning curve has been going up, and I appreciate all the support, direction, and questions and guidance that you're providing. So thank you for that. So
Great.
with that,
Thank you, Ray.
first round.
Thank you.
This evening. Thank you. Next presentation is our federal funds. Dan, if you could pull that up, please. Thank you. So one of the things that we've been doing, and we'll get it up here on the screen in just a second, is we've been working on the stimulus funds. Right now, the ARP, which is the American Rescue Plan, there is no guidance yet, the plan in the portal yet. So we're using some things that have been put together through our Albany BOCES, has put some documents to help us guide our planning, things like that. But tonight, we're going to do really just kind of preliminarily where we've been, kind of what we've collected so far, the direction that we're going. We do have a submission date by next Tuesday. And again, the feedback we had the opportunity to meet with the New York State Commissioner with small cities, and that was something I'd reinforce for the board and many boards before this board. Being involved with small cities is probably one of the best things that this board and many boards before this have chosen to participate in. They seem to be getting stronger and stronger by the year, and some good things have been happening recently. For small cities, the Maisto case was one, which is really looking as similar to the campaign for fiscal equity, for more equitable funding for small cities. After, I believe, 10 to 12 years that started, they were just awarded that win. So that could have further affect our foundation aid in the future for small cities. There's some legislation out there right now right now we can bond about 5%, and everybody else, every rural school district can go to 10. There is a movement, some legislation out there trying to get us and just equitably letting us go to the 10%, which could have great impacts on capital and projects in the future. So there's some really good things, some movement going on, and small cities have been a part of that. So I just wanted to reinforce that. So tonight, next slide, please. I'm not going to go through all of these slides. Some of these are backup, that every decision we make comes back to our mission and vision. So I always like to remind us that that's there. Our beliefs, our guiding principles, they're all at the root of every decision that we make. Next slide, please. Coherence is a big component of our strategic coherence plan. It's around making sense, sticking together, making those connections to make sure there's consistency of purpose, practice, and shared commitment. to ultimately improve student achievement. And everything that we do, whether it's, working on a building or providing resources and supports in the classroom, all of that contributes to improving student achievement for all of our students in our district. So it's really important that we focus direction, that we're creating that collaboration, that understanding, that coherent understanding, deepening our learning and understanding, and then making sure that we're measuring and making sure what measured gets done, so that internal and external accountability, and just that following constantly and taking that accountability piece, looking at where we're hitting the mark, where we're exceeding the mark, and obviously any places where we're not making the mark, making sure we readjust our focus direction, making sure we tighten that up to make sure that all aspects are moving toward allowing us to achieve our mission, vision, and ultimately all of our goals. Next slide, please. This is a slide you saw before. This is just the background information. I think it's just always important to have that there for you. So this is on the very high level CRRSA, which is the Corona Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act and the American Rescue Plan Act, just to give you that high level national kind of perspective in case you're asked, or anybody in our audience this evening or anybody that references can really get a feel for what this is. Next slide, please. The key highlights, this came from NISCUS. I shared this at the last meeting. It's a lot of money. It's 12% of the total general fund for a typical district. For us, it's 14 million. Our operating budget is 76 million this year, so we're right in line with that. It's not permanent. This money is over the CRRSA. We have to obligate by September 30th of 23, ARP by September 30, 24. So again, there'll be more time to fully expend them, but we have to have it obligated. And it does come with strings attached. Next slide, please. Again, just reminding you, May 10th, this was again a slide we shared. The applications are due by June 15th. That's for the CRRSAA. And then the ARP is due at the end of the month. We did do our assurances by May 24th. And then we're waiting further guidance just as far as the templates for the ARP. Obviously, we're working on the allocations and how we go about working at getting those funds into our district. Next slide, please. Just as a slide where it just brings it all together, it's one you've seen before, but there are 4.256 million for the CRISA or the CRRSAA, and then we have 10,258,994 for the ARP, and you'll see just to the left of that, New York State reserved 700,000 of our 10.2 million, and they create 3 grants of which we have not received information on how we apply for those, but what that is 1% for summer enrichment, 1% for after-school programs, and 499,000 for learning loss. So just to give you an idea, kind of what we're working with at this time. Next slide.
Brian, were those parameters set by the federal government or New York State?
They're the federal government overviews. Yep, parameters are from them. Yep, that's a great question. Thank you. Next slide. So this just breaks it down a little simpler, just pulls it out. You can just pull it out separately. The CRRSA is on this page, gives you your allocation, the time frame. We will not be going back into March of 2020. We're going to really look at using these new federal stimulus funds from July 1 forward of 21 forward. So the CARES Act, we should be able to take care of us in the current budget that we're in. So we'll monitor and make sure. But right now, our current budget is looking good. We'll do an update at the June 22nd meeting. We're actually in the application process now. The portal is open for CRRSA. And then yep.
I'm sorry, I wanted to go back to the page where with the 700,000.
Yeah, we can go back to this one, Mr. DiGiulano.
Yes, you said that the state has reserved the 700,000.
Yes.
Does that come out of the 10,258,000? Was that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I thought about the same thing. But yeah, if you look to the right, we have the 10,258,000 there on the right-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go back to the left in the yellow, you'll see 9.558994.
Okay.
So what they had to do is, part of the federal requirement is they had to reserve a certain percentage to create these things. So what my understanding is that, so when you look at those percentages, 1% for us is $100,002. Okay. And they did the same thing for the after school, and the same thing for the learning loss was 5%. So yeah, it's odd that we have to do these separate pieces, but that's the way the federal guidelines indicated to the state of New York.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It was a good question. Next slides, please. Yep, and I went over this one, but it's one-time allocation, allowable use. So more information, we'll keep you up to date with respect to that piece. The next slide, please. Yeah, pull them all out there. Just bring them all down, because we shared these at the last meeting. So this is just the state budget requires districts to develop a multi-year plan, and these are the components that we have to prioritize spending on non-reoccurring expenses in the areas of. And so you're seeing, here's the list. I won't go through those, but this is the base list that we have to work with. The next slide. So our criteria, this is a new slide for criterion for our spending plans. We want to make sure that it's aligned to our vision and our strategic coherence plans, strategic intents. We want alignment to allowable uses for the federal stimulus funds, obviously a requirement. Reflection of stakeholders' priorities for use of the funds. And I think we found a unique way to share the feedback. So I look forward in the next slide or two to share that with you. And then consideration of the following criterion. Does the proposed address a newly identified need? Does the proposal support or enhance an existing activity that is sacred to our vision or strategic coherence plan? So for example, all of the work that we did around literacy, and we were starting to see some pretty significant growth right before COVID with respect to our Oswego County Literacy Initiative and our training in the language essentials of teaching, reading, and spelling. Obviously, that's something that sticks out to us because we had seen that our work in social emotional developmental health for our kids in our community. We're one of the leaders here, I believe, in the county and in the region. This is a strong area for us, but an area where we need to continue. Strong is relative. I want us to be the strongest of the strong. And so this is an area that we'll continue to strengthen. Does the proposal represent an innovative step forward towards realizing our vision? So those are some of the criterion that we're looking at. And this is really an important part for us. And when we were meeting with the commissioner of New York State last week or so with small cities, I actually brought up sustainability and capacity, and she reinforced that districts really should look at what do we need initially right now as we go into this summer, next fall, into that first year to make sure that our kids are getting the supports and our staff are getting the supports to close those gaps, tighten up those holes to make sure we have it. And then also coupling with that, the long range over 3 to 5 years, what are we going to make sure that, so in 10 years, we look back and say, look at what we accomplished, look what we established in the Fulton City School District that we still have here, and that makes us special, unique, and meeting and offering the diverse range of opportunities and supports necessary for all of our kids in our district. So that's the great way. I'm looking at, in 10 years, can we look back and say, wow, look what we created and look at what we still have in place. That'll tell us that we were successful. And I had the privilege of something like that happening to me previously in my career. And when the money ran out in 3 years, we continued on our journey and we continued getting some pretty great results for kids. And there were other situations where it wasn't set up that way and programs were taken away. And that's the last thing we want to do. We want to make sure that the strongest of the strong programs that we've got to prioritize get into our general fund budget over the next 3 to 4 years to ensure, or that we make sure that those one-time costs provide that long-term support and resources. So that's a huge piece here. The capacity and the sustainability, I think, is the right way to look at things as well. Next slide, please. So we've had some opportunities for stakeholder input to this point, and we'll continue to do so. We've been sharing, obviously, throughout the budget process this year. We've done a survey with all Fulton City School District bargaining unit members. That was done the week of May 17th. We did a survey to families the week of May 24th. We've had ongoing surveys and dialogues throughout the year. Why is that important? We've actually collected a lot of information throughout the time, which really identifies some trends and needs for support. And then we've done discussion and brainstorming ideas at the Fulton City School District Budget Committee. We had that opportunity. We've had school site-based and leadership teams. We've met with our administrators, the superintendent's team, which is my senior team. And then we meet with the bargaining unit presidents on a monthly basis prior to the second meeting of the month with the Board of Education as well. So those are some of the things that we've been doing just to this point. Next
Brian,
slide. Yep.
Brian, based on our training yesterday that we had, I would just ask the input from our student stakeholders. That was a big component yesterday of what we heard about making sure that we've given them an ample opportunities for them to speak up.
Okay. Just writing that down, Ms. Griffin. You know my book here. That's a great point. I mean, we've done the surveys, they were sent to families, but that's an area where I think we can find a way to get more input from our students.
Well, only because they might not have been asked if someone in the household just went ahead and filled it out. And I just, after listening to the trainers yesterday, I thought it would be important that, I know we try to do that, but I don't want to rely on that one piece if that's all. And we may be doing other things and it might not be here. That's why I just wanted to make sure.
No, it's a great point. So my team will find a ways to do that. You know, obviously one of the things it was a really wonderful experience with a difficult time is when I got to meet students in the fall and get their feedback, and they were tremendous. Our young people, they truly understand what their needs are. They have a pretty good feel for what they'd like. So I think that's a great point. So thank you. And I've written it down in the book, and it's even been green highlighted, so it's going to stick right out. Next slide, please. So Dan, I want you to talk a little bit about what you're looking at. We've compiled the results here, but Dan, if you want to briefly just do an overview of what this slide is.
Sure, thanks. So as Mr. Palvino mentioned, we've conducted surveys with all of our bargaining units and with the community. So this is a summary of those. The survey questions really were based directly from those federal allowable uses, okay? So what we were looking for was a sense of which areas does our community feel we should prioritize in terms of use of the funds, all right? And those green boxes are there just for a quick way for you to see what the top 3 choices from each group ended up being. So you can see that overall, we had 579 results total. And if we blend them all together, those top 3 priority areas are safely returning students to in-person instruction, maximizing in-person instruction time, and operating schools and meeting the needs of all students. And you can see as you go to the right that those top 3 priorities are pretty consistent. You can see within the 579 total results, 375 came from the community and 204 from FCSD staff. Interestingly, and not surprisingly, among our instructional staff, among their top 3 related to addressing those COVID-19 pandemic impacts, that learning loss piece, okay? So when we go to the next slide, this will look very, very similar. Here, we get to a summary of our preliminary spending plan. And it was very important for us that where we prioritize the allocation of the funds, that reflects directly that input from the community and from our staff, okay? So you can see that those green boxes that indicate preliminarily, and again, we still don't have the official application for the ARP funds, so we expect it to look fairly similar to this. But these are the areas in which we intend to devote most of the funds, because those are the areas where our community has said that those are the priorities. So this is set up, this slide is set up to reflect pretty closely the type of information that we need to submit to New York State in what's called the business portal. The business portal is where we submit funding proposals, grant applications to New York State for approval. And the CRRSSA, as Mr. Palvino said, is already open, so we can see that one, and it really does look just like this. We have each of the allowable uses. Within each area, we need to indicate what we anticipate allocating towards that use over the time of the grant. We looked at, as you recall from a few slides back, ARP, and Mr. DeJalorme asked the question about the different percentages within the ARP funds. You might remember there were specific percentages of those funds that needed to be directed to summer programs, for example, or after school programs. So those are the types of strings attached to the funding that would help us determine why should we use this pool as opposed to the CRRSSA.
So I think one of the things, and it really evolved really from conversations with the board in the past. If you think about the way we're showing you how we update on a monthly basis, giving you the budget updates on our expenditures and our encumbrances. Now we also, if you look at, we really now have a way of monitoring, are we driving those percentages of the dollars in the direction? So now as a board, you can ask those questions. Are we maintaining those connections? Are we maintaining this plan? Are we driving the percentages the way we want to? It's a great way for us to make sure that we keep things in the direction they want. It's just another way to monitor in a visual kind of way. So I thought this was interesting, and I really see 5 and 6, which is the addressing the impacts of COVID and the implementing the evidence-based needs of students' social, emotional, mental health. That's almost 10% of the budget. So when you really look at that, 10% of $14 million is really is a chunk of change. But if you add those together, that's really the academic, social, emotional together. That's almost 30%. That's a healthy number. And then that doesn't even address when you go up into operating schools, meeting the needs of students. That's another whole level of supports and resources as well. So are there any questions on that slide? We'll take you through a couple more, and then I think we'll talk about some of the different types of supports and resources that we're talking about. Next slide. So this really, Dan, is just showing it in a pie chart, the same thing that you're really looking at, that you saw previously. Right? Dan, anything you'd add to this, or is that just another way of looking at it?
Just a visual representation.
Yep, so it just gives you a pie chart, different way to look at it than looking at it in the chart. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that you saw, just aligns with our strategic coherence plan areas. At the last meeting, we had talked about, for example, in leadership, making sure there's enhancements and strengthening our multi-tiered systems of supports. That's for social, emotional, as well as academic needs. Looking at our professional learning community structures, or our PLCs. I won't read all of these. I mentioned literacy already earlier this evening. That's where your reading and math interventionists are. Expansion of our Oswego County Literacy Initiative and letters to the upper grade levels. These are examples. Drop down to social emotional, obviously that's an area. Additional direct service support for social emotional needs, additional support to build staff capacity and wellness. So those are the types of things they have there. And then obviously see innovation at the bottom, which is ultimately our goal, which is graduation, maximizing those opportunities, those different pathways for graduation across New York State. So I think that's something else. And obviously our health and safety systems, which we talked about earlier with King and with Chase around ventilation improvements, things like that. So that falls in that innovation domain. Next slide, please. Again, this is just how the funds are driven to strategic coherence plan areas. The blue is leadership, the red is literacy. The instruction is 23, so you add that 23 and the 13, all of a sudden we're at 36, 37% there. The green is your social emotional, you add that. Now you see that over half the pie is instruction, literacy, social emotional developmental health. You got the slice of family engagement. That's an area where I think we need to look at that and enhance. And then that innovation component, and that's where that air, ventilation, technology, all of those areas are there. So you really see how it looks as a pie as well. So that's just how it would draw back to our strategic coherence plan, percentage-wise at this point in time. Next slide. So this is probably the slide that is the most interesting. This really talks about some of the specific things that we're building in those allocations of money that you saw earlier. So let's go to literacy. For example, reading interventionists at all levels, expansion of the Oswego County Literacy Initiative on the science of reading, all the way through 4 through 12. We had a hard press prior to COVID, K-3 and special education teachers. Now, we're hearing from teachers at the intermediate and secondary levels. We need to understand this, and there is designed to be able to do that. And so that's an example of how we can expand an initiative that we know was working for us, and now can we expand that lens all the way up into our high school. Question?
Brian, can you share a little bit, without going off your presentation, about how that will occur and how it will reach the students?
Specific like to that one, Dave?
Yeah, to the literacy piece, because is it just professional development, or what is it more than that?
Oh yeah, what it is, that's a great question. What it is, it's the professional development, but then it's coupled with the coaches and coaching, giving feedback to teachers. It's making sure that professional learning communities, it's a part of those discussions, and we're looking at horizontal and vertical teaming in that area. So it's really, it's professional development coupled with resources to be able to present and provide that information, deliver that information in classrooms. So those types of resources. And then coupled with the feedback from coaches, feedback through administration, through supervision, obviously that component. And then taking that information, getting that litmus and saying, is there more supports and direction on resources and training that teachers need? And I think if you looked at, that was similar to the model we used prior to COVID. And we were starting to see it was amazing, some of the conversations that I had with some teachers around the level of understanding around reading. So that's how that works in that area.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Instruction, you'll see math interventionists at all levels, industrial labs and studio at GRB, really getting back to be able to produce and get kids to innovatively problem solve, those types of things. Instructional coaches, instructional specialists for interdisciplinary instruction, really making sure that we have those coherent bidisciplinary connections across all of our content areas. Our social emotional health, Jerry, I don't know if you want to talk about this, is your domain and your expertise, and when you talk about it, you take it to a different level with your excitement about this. You want to talk about this at all?
Sure. So for our social emotional initiatives, recognizing that after a very challenging year on many levels, that our students and staff will both need some time to transition and get their bearings. We are looking at the development of a success coach position, which will really be focused on the development of SEL curriculum at the high school level. We have a curriculum K-8 that's well established at this point, and we're looking to enhance what's happening at the high school. There's great work there, and we're just building on that. Our K-8 restorative justice coordinators would be positions that would look to enhance what we've begun with our trauma sensitive practices and our restorative practices to change and reframe and hopefully help students foster stronger connection to the school community through ownership and voice in that process. Sixth grade counselor is in response to what we need to continue to be in compliance with our comprehensive counseling plan and also expand the services and communication we have with families around career readiness, beginning at that elementary level. Our Tier 2 social emotional supports, in keeping with our multi-tiered system of support, those are around providing primarily Tier 2 interventions in small group formats We recognize that as an area where we can expand what we're doing currently, and we believe will have a very significant impact on student skill building and success. And then continued professional development around social emotional learning for all of our staff in every role and position in the district.
Jerry, at a future point, will we hear the plan for reintroducing the students that have been totally remote to our learning environment as it relates to what you're sharing with us tonight?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Just writing that down. It's a great point. I just want to make sure I don't lose it. Thank you. All right. Family engagement, expanding parent university professional development around culture responsive family engagement. This is an area where I think we're going to continue on communications, finding ways to help our families help their kids as well, helping them understand and providing them the supports. I think sometimes we realize that our families have also gone through this pandemic together, and we have to make sure that our families are feeling support, and what we can do as school district to provide them the resources and supports and in many different ways. So I think that's important. I think sometimes we forget that. And I remember in my old world, one of the things I learned early on as a director of special education was parents would say it's hard being a parent of a student with a disability. And I really became very cognizant of asking that question of saying, are you getting the supports that you need to be able to support your child? And I learned a lot, and I was able to help my families connect to agencies and provide supports and help our schools better support families. And so I think that's a big part of this in family engagement that we need to flush out further. And then in innovation, obviously the Chromebooks, improvements to our health and safety systems, business and HR software improvements and enhancements. I think that allow us to be more efficient in some areas. And then update and upgrade classroom furniture is something that we're looking at. So having greater flexibility to move from, if you will, the old-fashioned rows, which is more antiquated, to being able to move into pairs, into clusters of 4 or 6. So being able to be more adjusted, because what we found was we had some rooms that had just tables, we have some rooms that had just desks, but we need to be able to change on a dime in the event that something happens, and we have to look at physical distancing. If there's another round of this, hopefully that would never happen. But those are the types of things, because a lot of our furniture in the district also is in need of improvement because it's worn out, and we need to do that. So that's something we've built in here as something that we can explore utilizing these funds as well, with input from our staff and students and administrations in the buildings.
Brian, are Chromebooks going to be available to each and every student again?
Excuse me, Mr. Lisi, would you like to comment?
They certainly are. That's part of our plan for some of the funds. You can say we actually want to continue to maintain that program and hopefully develop it further. So we certainly are going to continue to provide those.
Thank you. I think it's worked very well this year for a lot of children.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Ms. Lyons. When you really look at pre-COVID and some of the things that we had started, I mean, we had a one-to-one learning initiative already started 1.5 years before COVID, and our literacy initiative, our social emotional, I mean, you name it, we really had some pieces that gave us an advantage as we unfortunately had to make some transitions. It allowed us to do it maybe a little bit more smoothly, although nothing was smooth. I think we learned a lot. But I think you see actually back at the top, we've had PLC structure under leadership since I believe 2005 or 6. But I would say the feedback we're getting is some of our strongest PLC structures were this past school year. So that's one of the things that's come out of this that's actually strengthened us. And we know that that's a component that we've got to ensure that we continue K through 12.
And Brian, I just want to bring up here, you've mentioned it before, but under innovation, this is our opportunity to reimagine it. And there's been a lot being written and said about reimagining what reopening, that reopening is our opportunity to reimagine what our schools look like and offer, which falls in line with the direction we were going with innovation. But I think the opening is much larger now than when we started with the coherence plan. And I wondered if you wanted to speak to that for a moment.
Yeah, I alluded to it at the beginning. It's kind of my closing, but it was reimagining. We have an opportunity to shape the future of this district and reshape the way classrooms look. And I actually used the term, and the chancellor and the commissioner actually reinforced it a number of times after I said it in the meeting the other day, was that shame on us if we look the way we did going into COVID, and the classrooms don't look different, or the educational experience isn't different. Shame on us, we didn't accomplish what we should have accomplished. We've often talked about we haven't had the opportunity because we haven't had the funding to be able to support things. And now we have this opportunity, this window of time to reshape the way we do education, the way we engage our kids, the way we motivate our kids, the way our staff is be able to take it to the next level and let their creativity come out within the parameters and the supports that we provide. We have a great opportunity here, and to reimagine what schools look like. And in fact, some of the work that we're going to be doing this summer with our administration will really be looking at how do we lead in this very different time, this opportunity that we've been given. And then coupled, we'll keep our fingers crossed that the foundation aid promise from our legislators, who have been fantastic, comes to fruition, and we're 100% fully funded with our foundation aid, which is the promise coupled with the Maisto case, could result in some very good things and allowing us to create that reimagined opportunity to prepare for our kids so that they are the most competitive. When they walk out of our doors, that they are they have the opportunity to go out into the world and really make the difference that they want to make in their own lives, but in the lives of others. So that's really where I want to accomplish. I wrote down a couple things when we were talking, was that, we have the opportunity to do that. And what we're going to do is we're going to create systems, we're going to create processes, we're going to create the opportunity with resources and the supports. That's what's going to allow us to have the capacity and the sustainability, because processes and systems will live on. And what we have to do is make sure that they are there. And some of these positions and some of these resources and supports will allow us to get those systems and processes in place so that we can create that and ensure that reimagined education can actually take place. So I don't know if you'd add more to that, Robin. Yesterday at Small Cities, they were quite enlightening yesterday. It was an exciting day.
It was very exciting, and to see what others have already done, because they had an opportunity, and this is our moment. They had their moment. This is our moment. And it was very clear yesterday, listening to these folks at our Small Cities meeting, that this is our moment. So Brian, I don't know if you need anything from us tonight, or just an acknowledgement that we like the direction of the plan, or.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what you think. I mean, I think if you see how balanced it is, it aligns to the survey feedback. I'll anticipate a question. We will share with you all of the comments. They're actually all put together already, so we can send them out. So I anticipate that question. I normally get it from a couple of you, so I'm anticipating that. So it's already put together. And that's great, because when you see that, you'll see that there is great consistency out there among our groups. The key will be making sure we provide the communication and that feedback. And at some points we'll say, wow, this is going great. And sometimes if we're off mark a little bit, we need to be able to say, okay, we got to readjust here and keep moving forward. And that's the way we need to take this.
So Phelan, how are you feeling about it?
I actually had a different question, but thank you, Mr. Javier. I only have one question for you, and that is, right before COVID hit and shut down, we had a fairly good amount of staff who were questioning seeking out flexible seating for their classrooms, and we were looking at different models. And given this update and upgrade to classroom furniture under innovation, is this also something that we're able to look at going forward?
Yes, the answer to that is yes. The idea will be, what we wouldn't have thought about before was, can we flexibly physically distance with it too? Can we be able to use it that way? So we have to think about that. I think about so that ability. So for example, one of the things we were looking at was desks that were on these wheels, and chairs that were, so you could literally go from being singles to doubles to quadruples. So you could go quickly and shift your classroom on a dime. And that means you could change on instruction on anytime you have a lesson, you literally could go from independent to small group to large group to whatever you want to do. I think also expanding, can we clean it well? Can we keep it disinfect, all those kinds of things. You're right, though. I think that's a part of what we're looking at, because this is something we had already started and explored. Now we just have to think about it in a post-pandemic world. How do we ensure that we have the flexibility to move like that and be able to be flexible so that the kids are still using that good quality furniture at the same time being able to be able to shift and have that flexibility. But I think we can do that.
Yeah, I agree. I think even with the flexible seating, being able to move and give space is even more applicable in this type of situation.
So it gives us an opportunity to really not only explore, but start to implement some things. So,
Okay.
Which is good. This is a great question. Other questions or thoughts?
So a thumbs up if you're good with the direction that they're headed in. I see a couple. Yep. I think we look good, Mr. Pavino.
Okay. Next slide just gives you a kind of our time frame, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly here. Give it one more. Yep. And that's just, we did an update at the 25th, the 8th. We'll get it up on the website, just this initial piece. We're going to figure out a way to get feedback on that. We're going to submit and post by the 15th of June. We are hearing some districts are getting feedback within approvals within days, which is unheard of. So that's good news. Then on the 22nd, we'll come back and we'll just kind of give you any updates that we have around ARP. But you can see we've already globally, you can see how we're coherently using all of those monies, trying to think about them that way, and really having these two federal stimulus packages of money really fit together in a way where they connect and support one another. So I think, and so they use the term braiding, we're kind of braiding them together. So, and then we'll submit by July 1st on that plan, and post and follow all the directives. And then we'll continue to get ongoing stakeholder feedback and adjustments. And the commissioner made it very clear, and it was good to hear, that we'll have opportunities to readjust, and, after you get into the school, all those kinds of things, say, wait a second, this is what we anticipated. This is looking a little different. Needs are a little bit different. That'll allow us to adjust our monies. That's the feedback that her second in command and third in commands talked about when we were meeting with small cities as well. So lots of the plans are flexible and fluid, and we'll continue to move forward. So thank you. Finally, this evening, you can take that one down there, Dan. Thank you. And finally, this evening, the final part is our summer programs. I'm going to ask Dan and Jerry to talk a little bit about those. Wanted to provide you an update. It's been posted. We've sent communications. We've done postings for faculty, staff. We've also been having the application out for students as well. What we're seeing nationally is, and hearing regionally, is that getting people to apply and all those kinds of things. People are tired. It's been a long year. So, and students. So we're starting to see some things. So Jerry and Dan, if you will.
Sure.
Ready. Thank you.
Sure, I'll start. So, I think back to as an elementary principal, if the genie in the bottle landed on my office desk and I can make a couple wishes, the top one would always be summer programs for my elementary students. So this, well, initially actually it was the extended learning competitive grant proposal that prompted the team with Jerry and Liz Tiffany and Heather Witter to get to work developing a grant proposal for summer programs for our K-4 students. So we had a model in place with the federal stimulus funds that we just gave the overview of. That really solidified that we'd be able to pull off these programs for our students, whether or not we receive the competitive funds. So those are in development. We have, those are almost staffed, although as Brian started to allude to, summer staffing really nationwide is a bit of a challenge because deservedly educators need a break this summer. So we're doing our best to be flexible with the way that we're staffing the summer programs to ensure that our teachers have plenty of time to recharge after a year of working like they haven't before. But we do have just about enough staff. We're still getting the word out in some spots, and the student registrations are also coming in pretty nicely now. Yesterday, you may have seen the flyer that went home with students. Nice, colorful, actually, looks like this. Nice, colorful flyers that went home. And we are up to K-12, 256 students who have enrolled in our summer program. So we're pretty excited about that. And that actually really starts to speak to the question that Mr. Cordone asked about some of our strategies towards reintegrating our students who have been online. Okay, so our process now that we have these 256 registrations in, now we're in the process of really taking a look at those names and taking a look at students who we really want to be in these programs, students who our teachers know really could benefit from some time, both of socializing and as well as that academic boost. Okay, so we're calling on our teachers to make those efforts. I'm doing a lot of more personalized, targeted outreach now. Would you like to add anything to that, Jerry?
Yes, and to Mr. Cordone's question earlier, our online only learners is one of the groups that we want to reach out to and make sure they're aware of this opportunity, and if this is the right fit for them and their families, that it would provide a great transition from online only learning back to in-person instruction in the fall. So that will be one group that we will be reaching out to. And in regard to the hiring and filling up positions, as Mr. Carroll said, we have applicants. Just to quell any fears of any staff members who are listening, we haven't finalized placements yet. So if you heard Mr. Carroll say we're staffed, but haven't heard from us, that doesn't mean that you're not one of those people. We're still working on placements for those positions, and we'll be in touch very soon.
So there's a website that has information. I believe there's also, I call it there's a, what is the Scantron, the scan to register. There's a number of different ways to be able to do that. A QR code. Thank you. Yep. You're going to put that up there, Jer?
Yep. Here's the website. And the QR code is on those paper flyers that we sent home. So there are links to this in several places, including the communication that just went out today regarding our COVID protocol update. Has all the summer information on it again, as well as a link to register. So it takes you to this site. It describes each of the programs that we're offering this summer, and you right up through from K through 12, and then the registration links are also available on the second page. If people can't find them other places, they're there as well. So you can see that they're all available there.
So I just finally add, please help encourage your family and neighbors to take advantage of this program. This is, we're very fortunate and excited to be able to offer it this year. It's something we've always wanted to be able to offer, and we really hope that families find it to be a great benefit for them.
Yep. And transportation is provided as our school meals. And for our elementary students whose families might be looking for a full day option, we have partnered with Oswego County Opportunities. So although the academic Fulton City School District portion of the program will be a half day, there is a complementary program that OCO will offer right on site at the school to provide enrichment and social activities for students who need a full day option. And that is also free of charge. It is free of charge.
Free, free, free.
So are there any questions about the summer program?
I have one. When will we start reaching out to those families that are virtual or that we think will benefit?
Already started.
Okay.
Actually made a call to one tonight, and I know that our teachers, an interesting thing, we talk a lot about the silver linings of this year. The interaction between teachers and parents has reached a whole new level this year. And very much so with the online families. Get into a place, kind of the evolution of each online class over the course of the year has occurred based on a lot of interaction between parents and the online only teachers and figuring out what works best. So they're making those contacts with parents and making those recommendations. And our principals are encouraging their in-person teachers as well to continue doing that. So we expect to see the numbers to continue to increase.
Thank you.
Other questions or thoughts? Today I did forward to the board earlier today, communications with respect to mask wearing mandates in New York State. They were sent also to the entire staff today. You received that correspondence, and then as well as the family communication. I did that attached on an email earlier today. So that went out. We are going to be in accordance with the state with respect to all students and staff wear masks indoors, as well as on all district transportation, outdoors and in athletics, all events, all those kinds of things. We have not had clarification as of yet around the graduation criterion, because that's a little bit different around the mask wearing. So the governor talked a lot about making sure things are consistent, like he was talking about summer camps and schools yesterday. But there was the question, I asked that question in a forum today, and there was still graduation guidance as a separate thing. So I would hope that we'll get clarification on that as well in the coming days. So I just wanted to put that out there as an aside. So that all went out today, and we look forward to moving ahead. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I just want to throw out there too that I have heard from several parents and have seen some comments that they want you to be rid of the masks by September, but we don't have that mandate either for inside the building, correct?
No, and one of the things that I will tell you, Ms. Albacore, one of the things that I said and my team would say is last summer we received the 24 pages of reopening guidance, and then you had all these assurances, if you remember, the 145 pages, all the good stuff that we were dealt with. And we have to have a reopening plan for September, taking last year's reopening plan and updating it, if you will. And the only thing changed, they finally updated the 24 pages of guidance. And the only thing changed in there was a couple things where I said on June 7th, we can do indoor and out, the outdoor masks. So we have not received any further guidance in changing right now with what we're dealing with inside buildings. Obviously, our wish would always to be as not have them, obviously, is one of the best things. But again, we're waiting for that guidance at this time. So there's been no changes other than what I announced today.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify for folks who are listening that it's not you making this decision, that we are waiting for state and for state ed to let us know that it.
Yeah, that's a great point you bring up, Ms. Albacore. I think one of the other pieces that was interesting was the letter that started this all last Friday, the letter to the CDC, which got misinterpreted in the press. And then the CDC's response actually was back to, we still recommend masks indoors and all of those things. So the CDC really needs to, they're the ones that'll drive what happens from their perspective, then drives the New York State Department of Health, which then comes obviously out to the Oswego County Health, and then we deal with that guidance altogether. And hopefully we'll be getting newer guidance sooner than later, and that we hit 70% very quickly with our vaccinations. And then we really have the litmus test on what do we look like as we've opened up more? Are we able to hold those numbers and then hopefully be able to transition into the fall and hold those numbers at the very low numbers we're at right now. And I will say, I'm proud to say today, was the first COVID announcement from Oswego County. No new cases were on that sheet. So we've made it all the way to 0, at least today, as a new case. So with that, I turn it over to you, Ms. Griffin, and thank you for your support and throughout the course of the year and this evening. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, just to clarify, just to make it crystal clear for the community members that are watching, like Mrs. Abelgore said, it's not up to us. It goes CDC, state ed, Oswego County, then comes down to you. So all those have to align before we can make before you can make that decision. So thank you so much.
Okay. If we're ready, I would ask someone to move item 4.01, please.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Periyama, yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. DeJarme,
Yes.
Mrs. Abelgore,
Yes.
and Mr. Crandall.
Yes.
Item 5.01.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Periyama, yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. DeJarme,
Yes.
Mrs. Abelgore,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall.
Yes.
Would someone move item 6.01, please?
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
I'm a yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. DeJarme,
Yes.
Mrs. Abelgore,
Yes.
and Mr. Crandall.
Yes.
Are my colleagues interested in batching 7.01 through 7.09?
Move it.
Second.
Is there any discussion on these items? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
I'm a yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. DeJarme,
Yes.
Mrs. Abelgore,
Yes.
and Mr. Crandall.
Yes.
Board forum. Mr. DeJarme, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, I just want to thank Mr. Palvino for the update and the presentation on the stimulus. And thank you for answering my question. I was just a little confused there. That's all. Didn't know if that was an extra 700,000 coming into us or not. So
I wish it was.
Thank you. Mrs. Lyons?
Thank you for all the presentations. I guess that's all I have to say tonight. Not a lot to say, but thank you.
Mr. May?
I don't think I have anything to say, but thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Abelgore?
Yes, I too liked the updates. A lot of information in there. I do have a question. This might seem like a silly question, but over at the high school, I was over there running this morning around 5 this morning, and the big green, I don't know, is it the air conditioning unit? Is it part of the? It's right on the tennis court side. It's over by the front, those main doors there on the tennis. Is it always that loud? Like, it sounded like a freight train coming through, and I just wasn't sure if maybe something was out of place with it, or maybe I just really hadn't noticed it before.
You're talking the large green equipment right next to the entrance going into the gym area. On that right next, that's actually the generator, and it preps itself. It has to like run as it's on a schedule where it has to kick on and work. Yep. So that's actually the generator for GRB.
So that's not always like that. That's just when it first kicks on.
It has to. It's like on a generator has to run like once or twice a week, and it has to run itself and runs through. It's kind of on a scheduled thing.
Okay. I almost texted you at 5 this morning because it was just overly alarming. I had never heard it before, so I just wanted to. And then
it's very loud.
I just wanted to make sure that wasn't one of our things that Carrie was talking about that was going to be replaced. So, Yeah, so enjoy the warm weather. I hope that our students are staying and staff are staying cool enough the next couple days. I did see and hear that some districts not necessarily in our area have gone remote due to this heat wave. So if that's something that you're considering, keep us updated. Stay warm or stay cool, everybody.
Yeah, well, not even close. I was thrilled to see that I see some 70s in the forecast through the weekend and into next week. So hopefully that's a true forecast.
I will thank you for answering my silly question.
It wasn't. I was out there one day and I called Al once. I'm like, what is this?
Okay.
Mr. Cordone.
Yes, I want to also echo the thanks for the reports. Also want to, give a thank you to the high school staff and Mrs. Parkhurst and her team for all of the work they've done to kind of get as close to normal and end of the school year for our students as possible. I know they had their awards ceremonies yesterday, and the calendar's been full. So I know it means a lot to the kids, and I think it probably means as much to the adults because it's what they like to do. So I just wanted to thank them for all their hard work.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yep. Thank you for the presentations. I wanted to thank Mr. Carroll and Mrs. Geithner about the summer program. I'm very excited about that. 256 students is wonderful, and I'm glad to see that number climbing. I think our community is super going to appreciate the busing and the food and the OCO that's just going to drive more, kids in there. So partnering for them. So thank you so much for all your hard work with that. I also just wanted to mention we have a lot of musical events that are really exciting to feel kind of like we're back to normal coming up soon, both at the elementary and high school. So I'm grateful for that. And congratulations, Reagan and Sam, on your awards yesterday. You guys stole the show. And all of our students who received awards last night. So congratulations and have a wonderful evening.
Mr. Crandall.
Oh, I just want to thank everyone for their presentations, and that's it.
I'd like to start by offering my congratulations to Sam and Devin Nicholson on the Chauncey Scholarship Award. Well done. I would also like to take a moment to say that it's wonderful to be able to view a lot of these events and or the things that are placed on Facebook regarding our students and their achievements. And it brings a smile to my face. I can't imagine how proud their families must feel, but their teachers must feel very good to know and see that their students are being recognized for all of the achievements that they've made, especially during this difficult year and last couple of years, actually. My thanks for all of the reports. They're exciting, and I'll leave it at that. I'm excited for the future. I feel like we're finally working our way out of a very dark spot, and it's looking good. So thank you all. I know you've worked very hard throughout COVID, and you haven't slowed down as we reimagine our reopening. And I thank you for those efforts. And I hope, Mr. Polvino, that you can convey that to all of our staff, that I know it's appreciated. With that, I would ask someone to move item 8.02.
Move it. Second.
Is there any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mrs. Cooper?
I'm a yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mr. DeJarme?
Yes.
Mrs. Alvagore?
Yes.
And Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
So after a 5-minute break, I'd like to come back, and the board is going to enter executive session to take care of business. Once we complete that, we will come back out into the public portion to close the meeting. Anyone and everyone that is watching, thank you for joining us, and we hope you learned as much as we did this evening. Everyone stay safe, stay cool, and I'll see the rest of you in 5 minutes. 9:32.
Yeah, we're ready to go back in, Tim. Go ahead.
Yep, you're all set.
Thank you.
Oh, did we write down the time? Okay, and so
9:32.
item 8.03, please.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Good night, everyone.
That is a 6-0 vote. Thank you.
All right. Have a good evening, everybody. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Aye.